As homesteaders in a temperate climate, in the spring we rely heavily on eggs before anything comes up in the garden. We're using eggs a lot, so we wanted to share with you a couple of recipes for eggs. I have one for German pancake, which turns out to be not particularly German, which is going to be linked down below. And today Melanie is going to teach us how to make an egg bake.
You can see it's doubled in size from what it was. Oprah, Melanie, Martha Stewart. Thank you so much. It's so wonderful to have you in my kitchen. And this is something that I really love doing because it uses a huge amount of eggs. And this time of year, we actually have them piled in our house because we have so many eggs and we like to take advantage of that. I like to start with either sausage or bacon. It just adds some depth of flavor. It's not necessary. We've done vegetarian ones for my sister and love them as well, but our favorite is definitely to start with sausage or bacon. And I'm using breakfast sausage. Our family has a lot of food allergies. We need to eat without any gluten or dairy. We don't eat many grains. We can't eat rice. So we're really limited, but we can really enjoy what we have as well and make the most of it. So we're using coconut oil in the pan. You can use any kind of high temp oil. By using cast iron skillet, you actually get small deposits of iron in your food, and people who have anemia actually have pulled out of anemia just by cooking with cast iron. The sausage I'm using is coming from a local farm that we have just not far from us at all, and they're raised out on pasture and they're fed a really healthy, clean diet. Normally for the 7 of us, I would use 1 package of sausage, but we have 2 families here today, so that's a total of 12 people, and so we're going to do 2. The sausage is almost browned, and so now I'm going to dice up some potatoes that I've already had baked. They were left over from dinner last night. And then we'll whip up some eggs and toss in some salt and pepper, and we'll be ready to throw it in the oven. So if you'd like to do a vegetarian version of this, I would suggest starting with caramelizing an onion so that you get that depth and that richness of flavor that we're getting from the meat. So start by caramelizing an onion. Use the same pan. I would cook it in the cast iron pan, and then you can throw in kale or collards or chard or whatever greens you have. Spinach, if you want to forage some greens, throw that all in there. You can still use the potatoes. Mushrooms are really good in this. It's just kind of a free-for-all, whatever you have on hand. I love this recipe. It's so simple, and I use a ton of eggs all at once, but I just throw it together and it doesn't take long at all, and it's really hearty and filling. And then we get all of that nutrition from the eggs, because right now my chickens are free-ranging out there and cleaning up my garden, and so all of that nutrition from everything they've been foraging we get to enjoy. The sausage is all finished up, so let's move on to the potatoes. The skins from these are, we ate these for dinner last night, so the skins are kind of tough. So I'm going to go ahead and peel those off. And then I'll just dice up the potato. So these potatoes are extra special to us. Once a year in October, we go to a potato farm and they let us glean the potatoes for free. So we just follow along behind the harvester and can pick up as many potatoes as we want. And this last year we gleaned 600 pounds of potatoes, and we're still eating from them. We're on our last box now, but they always last us from October into April, and it is just wonderful to have so much wonderful, hearty food that's free. I'm going to put my scraps in the chicken bucket. Potato peels are something that you do not want to feed your chickens raw. They don't stomach it well. If they're cooked, then go ahead and throw them in. You can glean potatoes from any of the farms in Idaho, and you just have to call the offices, and they'll tell you where they're harvesting. But these potatoes, I really wanted organic potatoes. I didn't want to worry about whether there was GMOs or if they'd been sprayed with something. Most of the potato fields have been sprayed with a chemical or an acid to kill the tops of the potato plants, and it forces the potatoes underground to grow big and plump right at the very end and put all of their energy into the potato. So I was kind of a hound dog, and I just went on a chase, and I called every produce company I could to find out if there were organic potato farms in Idaho. And there's a couple of them. And through a series of about 10 phone calls, I finally was able to get a hold of the actual farmer, and he lets us come back every year. So I like to melt some coconut oil to put in the bottom of the pan. It always sticks a little bit, but it really helps significantly if you do put the oil in the bottom. And you can use bacon grease for this, that's really delicious. You can use any kind of like an avocado oil or whatever you use for high heat. This is my grandma's vintage pan, and it's very dear to my heart. But any kind of a cake pan will work for this, or you could put it into, I'm going to do one of them in the skillet so you can see that as well. For this size pan, I use about 16 eggs. So I've melted the coconut oil, and I'm just going to set the pan aside. It's just so that I can start throwing ingredients in there.
This is my daughter Stella, who wants to learn how to make the egg bake too.
That sounds good. Thank you for joining me. All right, do you want to cut one? Sure. Okay. So what we're going to do, if you want to stand it up this way, now we're going to cut between, okay? So right down the middle there. Good job. Okay, now we can set it this way, and you can cut it a couple times through that way and then cut it the other way, and that way we get potato squares. Perfect. Good. Okay, now we'll scrape them into our pans. I'm going to go ahead and divide the sausage, and I'll put a little more in here because it's a little bigger pan. I'll leave some in there, and then we can put the potatoes into it. So I kind of spread it evenly because the eggs are just going to go on top of it. And that way it's all distributed throughout the whole thing. Okay, Stella, you want to put some potatoes in these? Good job. Do you want to get some more off the other cutting board, and we'll sprinkle them in this pan? Okay. So since we're using sausage, it's got a lot of flavor and there's a lot of seasonings in it. So I'm not going to do very much to the eggs. I'm just going to whip them up in the blender so they're nice and fluffy. If you don't have electric appliances in your kitchen, then just whisk it by hand. So we have about 36 hens right now that are laying for us, and they're laying really well. So we have eggs coming in what feels like by the truckload right now. As it's just starting to warm up and it's early spring, they really ramp up and they lay a ton of eggs right now. And it'll start to taper off late summer for us anyway, as the light starts to disappear, and then they'll go into a molt, and through the winter we really ration our eggs. And I even ended up buying some this winter because they just weren't producing much at all. You can see that our eggs haven't been washed and they're not perfectly sparkling clean. I am careful about, that there's not manure and stuff all over them when I use them, but we don't wash them when they come in. And the reason is that there is a bloom, is what it's called, and it's a protective coating because the eggshell is really porous. And so the bloom is just something that seals the egg, and it keeps anything from penetrating through that shell. So if you do wash your eggs, make sure that you put them in the refrigerator. But we don't wash them, so we just keep them on the counter. I have actually had them keep on the counter for a couple months, and they do just fine. And then I've also taken them with the bloom on and put them in the fridge, and I've had them in the fridge for, I don't know, maybe 8 months. So they keep for a really long time. And I've even heard that you can put mineral oil on them and make them last longer than that. If you're concerned about your eggs, or you've had them for quite a while and you don't want to risk cracking open a stinky egg in your kitchen, one of the best ways to tell if they're bad or not is to take a tall glass of water, and you can float them in it. So if it falls all the way to the bottom, you know it's really fresh. And then it'll start to tip up a little bit. Instead of laying down like this, it'll tip up. And that's because there's an air pocket inside of the eggs. And the air pocket gets a little bigger at a time as time goes on. And so they'll move higher up in the cup. So after you've had them for quite a while, bobbing up and down, you probably don't want to open that egg. Like I mentioned earlier, I've had my chickens out in the garden and they've been totally cleaning it up for me. I didn't clean my garden out in the fall. And so they're getting all kinds of bugs and they're getting the new grasses and stuff that are coming up. And so the color of the yolks is really dark right now. It's just such a rich, some of them are just plain old orange. It's really, really wonderful. So as their nutrition and their foraging goes up, the color of the yolk will become brighter and deeper. Since we're allergic to dairy and I don't like the taste of coconut milk with eggs in a savory dish, what I do is I put a little bit of water in there, and it sounds strange, but it'll have the same effect that milk will, where it'll fluff up the eggs and make them not quite as dense. So if you can use milk though, use milk. So this is super easy to do in a blender. I'm definitely spoiled with my blender. You can see it's doubled in size from what it was. It's not necessary to do all of this. It's just what my family really likes, them really light and fluffy. But you can just as easily whisk them with a fork and then pour it over. Okay. So that was 18 eggs, and you can see everything is covered. That's always my goal. If you're going to be doing a vegetarian version of this, or if you're using, if you're going to use a meat that doesn't have all the seasonings that the sausage has in it, make sure that you put some salt and pepper into the egg mixture, and I would do that when it's in the blender. So probably you're going to need about 1 to 2 teaspoons of salt and a really good sprinkling of pepper, which you could do on the top if you wanted to. My oven is set at 350 degrees, and I think it usually takes about 20 minutes to bake. You just kind of have to poke in the middle and make sure the eggs are cooked all the way through. And you want to test it and make sure it's done in the center, and it'll come out clean.
Thanks for hanging out with us today in the Skill of the Month Club at Melanie's home. Please do check out Melanie's channel at Road to the Farm. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.